In this video, I'm going to make a tank inspired by Warhammer 40K Grot tanks, which will also be usable for games such as Tonks. I'm using 4 different thicknesses of cardboard: single corrugated, a thicker food packaging cardboard, a thinner food packaging cardboard, and some thin cardboard that's probably about 140 GSM. I'm also using 3 sizes of paper straws, and some bamboo skewer, as well as some cocktail stick, which isn't shown. For the main body of the tank and the turret, I'm using single corrugated cardboard. The first piece I cut at 4 cm by 6 cm. I then cut 2 more at the same size, each with the corrugations running at 90 degrees to the previous to add some strength. Next are 2 pieces to go under those. In this case, I'm cutting each half a centimetre shorter than the one before. These will go flush with the back, but not with the front. I then move on to the top area. The intent is to make the main body approximately 2.5 to 3 centimetres high. The number of pieces of cardboard used will possibly vary depending on its thickness, and in this case I'm using 11. I'm also cutting an indent in the front that will be vertical at the back with a sloped area next to it. The indent is in theory 2 centimetres square, but as the first piece is 1/4 centimetre shorter than the one below, the first indent is 2 centimetres across by 1 3/4 centimetres deep. Each subsequent piece is 1/4 centimetre shorter to create a steep slope for the front and a vertical back. I didn't video this at the right time, so what I've just described is being done in the inset video. These are then all glued together with Gorilla wood glue. I like wood glue because it has a longer working time than either hot glue or super glue, doesn't have the lumpiness or stringy problems of hot glue, and it sticks cardboard together very strongly and comparatively quickly. The underneath layers I'm sticking in place so that they are flush at the back and tapered at the front. The layers above that I'm doing flush at the back and tapered at the front as well. This is the finished body. I'm now going to clad it with the thickest of the 3 non-corrugated cardboards I'm using. First I measure the size of the base, cut out a piece of cardboard that size and stick it on with wood glue. Once this is set, I do the same with the top of the body, which requires a more complicated piece of cardboard thanks to the indent. Once the top and bottom pieces of cladding are on, I'm then trying to attach pieces that are the right size. But if they're too big, I'm trimming them down with a knife once they're dry. I continue cladding the rest of the body in the same way. The indent part and slopes at the front require more trimming. This is the finished body. As you can see, there are a few gaps which I'm going to deal with later. I have a secondary turret that's going to be placed in the indent here. If that sounds similar in design to the Colonial Marines APC, there's a reason for that. This turret is being made with a flat front face and a curved back. The hole punch cardboard disc gives me an idea of the size of the turret, then I use the single corrugated cardboard to see how many layers of it I want. I use the cardboard disc to draw an incomplete circle on one piece of single corrugated, then use that piece as the template and cut out more. Just as with the body, I'm alternating the direction of the corrugations. The main turret is being made in a similar fashion. I'm drawing the design on one piece of card and cutting it out, then using it as a template to cut the other pieces. These are all glued together, again with the corrugations running at 90 degrees to each other. The top, bottom and front of the small turret, and all the sides of the main turret are again clad in the thicker cardboard, just like the body was. For the curved part of the smaller turret, I'm using this thinner cardboard which curves more easily, but otherwise I'm making it in the same way. If there are any gaps in the cladding that I think won't get covered up later, I'm applying a tiny bit of filler, otherwise known as spackle, then removing any excess. Next is the tracks. The wheels I'm making from the thinner cardboard, punching holes out of it that are 60mm in diameter. I'm using 10 discs in total, so that the main part of the wheels is about 5mm thick, and gluing them together. I'm then punching 2 smaller discs, each 10mm in diameter, and gluing them in the centre of the main part of the wheel. And then a final 3mm disc in the centre. You could add 1mm discs around the edge as rivets, but that's a lot of extra work. I'm making 5 larger wheels for each side of the tank for 10 in total. I'm also adding 2 smaller wheels on each side. The smaller wheels are made from 10mm, 3mm and 1mm discs in the same way, and are mostly there to add strength. The wheels will be stuck to another piece of the thicker cardboard with 4 sides, 2 of them parallel. This is cut so it is roughly the same length as the body of the tank at the top and smaller at the bottom. A wheel is stuck at each corner of the bottom so that the central disc looks to be just higher than the bottom of the card. The top 2 wheels are placed similarly. The remaining large wheel is placed in the middle of the bottom. The 2 smaller wheels are placed at the top. The track is made from 2 strips of the intermediate cardboard. The strip is 8mm wide, slightly wider than the wheels. The first strip is then glued to the wheels with a join on the bottom. Once this is dry, the second strip is then glued to the first, but with a join in a different place on the bottom. One track is next to the indent, so I'm going to clad the exposed area with some cardboard. Rather than gluing it precisely to size, I'm gluing a piece on and then I'll cut the excess off once it's dry. I'm also masking the area with some of the thinnest cardboard. Next are the treads for the tracks. With these I'm again using the thicker cardboard. I'm cutting pieces 8mm wide, the same as the track, and roughly, this is orky, 5mm in the other dimension. I then glue these around the outside of the tracks, in roughly even spacing. Here are the turrets and the main body. I'm going to use 6 25mm discs glued together on the bottom of the turret to act as a spacer between the turret and the tank. You can use less if you want a smaller space. I'm using this many because when I added them on the first tank, which was a late stage addition, I had to use that many and decided to do so on the others. For the smaller turret, I'm using 4 10mm discs. To make the turrets rotate, I'm using bamboo skewer for the large turret and a cocktail stick for the smaller one. Using my pin vise, though the drill bit came from a regular set, I'm drilling a hole in the bottom of the main turret where the skewer will go. I originally used bamboo skewer for the smaller turret as well, but that proved to be a bit too large, and so I used cocktail stick instead. I drilled matching holes in the main body and cut the cocktail stick and bamboo skewer to length. Each was glued into its respective turret but not into the main body, allowing them to rotate. Next is the guns. I got 3 widths of paper straw from drive-thrus. I'm using the smallest for the small turret and the others for 2 guns on the main turret, one width sliding just inside the other. I cut them to the desired length with a knife. The 2 pieces of the main turret guns are then glued together. I'm using bamboo skewer again to attach the guns to the turrets, which gives the join added strength. The skewer isn't wide enough on its own, so I'm wrapping paper around it to make it thicker. This is then glued into the paper straw. Using the pin vise and the same drill bit, I drill holes in the front of the turrets and glue the guns in place. Next, I'm going to be adding some bits to the turret and the main body. I'm going to make a hatch for the turret made from a 16mm disc and a 12mm disc glued on top. For a viewing port for the main body, I hole punch a 40mm by 8mm piece of card. This is then glued to a 20mm by 14mm piece of card. I then cut a 5mm strip of card. This was glued to the top hatch to represent a hinge. I glued the viewport to the main body. I trimmed off the excess from the top hatch's hinge and glued that to the main turret. For the back of the tank, I'm first making an exhaust pipe. This is a piece of the smallest paper straw, with one end blocked off by having a rolled up strip of paper glued in, and then a hole punch 6mm circle of card glued on the end. I punch out 10 14 by 8mm pieces of card and glue them all together. I cut an 18mm length of the thickest straw and glued a 10mm piece of card on each end. I then went back to the exhaust pipe and using the pin vise drilled and neatened up some holes in it. With the piece made from the punched out rectangles, I measured it, cut a strip of the thinnest card at that width, then glued this around the edge. Back to the straw with the closed ends. Using the thinnest card, I cut 4mm strips and glued them around it like banding. Here are the 3 finished pieces which will be glued to the back of the tank. I'm now starting to put the tank together. I glued the sticks into the turrets, then propped the main body up on scrap foam board for gluing the tracks on. With that done, I'm cutting some teeth to stick onto the front of the tank. I'm sticking the exhaust onto the back of the tank vertically, then the rectangle horizontally, then the barrel-like straw above that. The rectangular piece provides support to help keep it on. Using the thin card, I'm going all over the tank and sticking odd-shaped pieces of it to look like metal plates. Once that's done, I'm punching 1mm discs from the same cardboard. I stick these on in appropriate places, using a toothpick to add a dab of glue to the spot, then picking up the discs with the point of a knife to apply them. I thought about adding rivets to the wheels and treads, but that would have taken a lot more rivets, and I didn't. Once everything was glued on, I left it for a day to set solid before painting. First, I used a combination of Mod Podge and black paint because there are a lot of small bits of cardboard on this and I wanted to make sure this stayed there. I touched this up with black paint if needed. I then heavily stippled on burnt umber over most of the surfaces, doing this twice. I then stippled on one lighter coat of burnt sienna. Together, these make the thing look rusty. I then dry brushed gunmetal grey metallic all over the tank to give it a metallic sheen. I then stippled green onto the tank body and red and blue onto the panels. This is just cheap acrylic paint and it required multiple coats. I used white on the rear rectangle for the base of a check pattern and as an undercoat on the teeth. The white is one of the more expensive paints and has better colour coverage. I then finished off the check pattern with black. The teeth were then painted yellow, which took several coats again. I then repainted the rivets of the teeth with a gunmetal grey. I then dry brushed everything with silver metallic. Finally, I took some black acrylic ink, diluted this with water, and then used this around the rivets and at the edges of panels. And here is the finished tank. I've got two more Grot tanks of different designs that were built using the same method. Both hulls and turrets are designed differently, but assembled in the same way. Not having the turret glued to the body not only allows the turret to rotate, but also allows it to be removed. Because they all have the same colour scheme, removable things like the main turrets can be swapped between them, and spare turrets for such as the secondary gun can be made. This doesn't mean that turrets always look sensible on the tank bodies, but these are Ork tanks, and Grot tanks at that. You may think that magnets would work here to get the same effect, and you'd be right. But when I was making the tanks, I was just using junk rather than anything bought. I'm thinking of going back and replacing the skewers with magnets, which will be easier on the hulls than the turrets, and going forward I'm definitely considering using magnets in similar situations. Want to help support the channel? Then please like, comment, subscribe, share, join our Patreon, or buying through the Amazon or drive-thru links below helps support the channel at no cost to you.